Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that every decision you've made, your career, your relationships, even the way you dress, hasn't really been your own. Imagine the creeping suspicion that your so-called choices were laid out long before you arrived, etched into invisible blueprints drafted by family, culture, and society itself. You believed you were free, but now you begin to see the faint outlines of the cage. And here's the strangest part. It isn't the cage that terrifies you, it's the thought of stepping outside of it. What happens to the person who dares to live differently, who refuses to kneel before the quiet commandments of conformity? They are met not with applause, but with suspicion, not with admiration, but with fear. Because nothing frightens society more than the individual who cannot be controlled by its rules. Think of it. We claim to worship freedom, yet despise the ones who embody it. The eccentric, the dissenter, the visionary, they are often mocked, exiled, or even destroyed. Why? Why does the presence of one non-conforming soul feel like such a threat to the many? Maybe you felt this in your own life. The subtle punishments for stepping out of line, the raised eyebrows when your dreams don't fit the script, the awkward silences when you speak an unpopular truth, the passive-aggressive remarks that remind you to just be realistic. Have you noticed how quickly the world corrects anyone who dares to disrupt its illusions? We say we want originality, but secretly we demand sameness. We claim to value authenticity, yet reward performance. We encourage thinking outside the box, but only if the thinking fits comfortably back inside. Isn't it strange? And so a question begins to haunt us, a question too heavy to ignore. What is it about non-conformity that terrifies society so deeply? To even approach this question, you must be willing to enter unsettling territory. Because the answer is not flattering. It does not paint society as noble or rational. It reveals something primitive, something fragile at the heart of our collective existence. Nietzsche once observed that people don't really want freedom. They want comfort. Real freedom, after all, is terrifying. It strips away excuses and leaves you standing naked before responsibility. And the one who dares to seize that freedom becomes a mirror that exposes everyone else's slavery. Carl Jung described something similar in his exploration of the shadow, the hidden, repressed parts of ourselves we would rather deny. When a non-conforming person appears, they awaken the shadow of the collective. Their very existence calls into question all the compromises and self-deceptions the group has made. But perhaps the most unsettling paradox is this. Society cannot survive without conformity, and yet conformity slowly suffocates the human spirit. Civilization depends on shared rules, shared language, shared values. Yet the very structures that hold us together can also become the walls of a prison. So here we stand, caught between two irreconcilable truths. We need conformity to survive, but we need non-conformity to truly live. And this is where the unease creeps in, isn't it? Because somewhere deep inside, you know you felt the pull of both. You know the safety of blending in, and you know the ache of betraying yourself to belong. You've seen how rebellion sparks both envy and hostility, how courage and madness are often mistaken for the same thing. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that society fears nonconformists, but that most of us learn to fear becoming one ourselves. We silence our instincts, bury our questions, and fold ourselves into shapes that fit the mold. We call it maturity or being practical, but maybe it's simply surrender. What then is the price of conformity? And what is the cost of defiance? Is it better to betray yourself for the comfort of belonging, or to be exiled for the integrity of your soul? The question lingers like a haunting echo, demanding an answer. Why does society fear those who refuse to conform? And what happens to the rare few who dare to live free? This is the mystery we must confront, the paradox we must unravel. But before we can seek answers, we must first expose the roots of this fear, buried deep in psychology, philosophy, and the fragile architecture of human civilization itself. Why does society recoil when someone dares to stand apart? Why do we, who claim to value freedom and individuality, instinctively turn on the one who embodies them most fully? To understand this, we have to peel back the layers of human psychology and philosophy, down to the primal mechanisms that govern not only our minds, but the very fabric of civilization. The fear of nonconformity is not a modern invention. It is ancient, embedded in our survival instincts, and reinforced by centuries of culture and belief. The primitive roots of belonging. Imagine yourself thousands of years ago, a fragile human wandering the savannah. Alone, you are vulnerable. Predators circle. Hunger gnaws. Death is only ever a mistake away. Your only safety lies in the tribe, its protection, its shared knowledge, its collective strength. To be cast out from the group was a death sentence, and so conformity was not optional, it was survival. You learned to mirror the behaviors of those around you, to adopt their rituals, to silence doubts that could sow division. You bowed to the unspoken law, belong or perish. This ancient instinct still beats in your chest today. You may live in cities instead of jungles, but the psyche has not forgotten the terror of isolation. The subconscious whispers, "If I am too different, I will be abandoned. If I am abandoned, I will not survive." This is the first root of society's fear. The nonconformist threatens the fragile glue of belonging, awakening in the Gyar, a primal terror. What if they are right and we are wrong? Jung and the shadow of the collective. Carl Jung understood this fear not only as survival instinct, but as a confrontation with what he called the collective shadow. Each society, like each individual, hides away the parts of itself it does not wish to see. A society that worships success represses its fear of failure. A culture that praises order represses its chaos. A community that insists on virtue hides its vices. All these rejected truths gather in the collective unconscious like storm clouds waiting to burst. The nonconformist, by refusing to play the role assigned, becomes the lightning rod for these buried tensions. They embody what society denies. They become, as Jung might put it, the shadow made flesh. Think of the whistleblower who exposes corruption in a system built on lies. Think of the artist who dares to express truths others dare not name. Think of the mystic, the eccentric, the revolutionary. They are rarely greeted as saviors, more often they are crucified. Why? Because they confront the group with its own hypocrisy. They shatter the illusion of moral purity. They remind everyone of the darkness we'd rather deny. Nietzsche and the terror of freedom. Friedrich Nietzsche pushed the analysis further. He argued that most people do not want freedom. They want security. True freedom demands responsibility. It asks you to become the author of your own life, to invent meaning where none is given, to stare into the abyss and not look away. This is terrifying. And so we invent gods, ideologies, and social norms to shield ourselves from the unbearable weight of freedom. Nietzsche called these collective illusions herd morality, the comfort of belonging to the flock, where decisions are made for you and the burden of authenticity is lifted. The nonconformist, then, is dangerous because they refuse. Either herd. Their existence proves that another way is possible, and this proof is intolerable because it exposes the cowardice of those who remain. Nietzsche once wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. The tribe will call their rebellion arrogance, madness, even evil." But beneath the accusations lies a simple truth. The nonconformist reveals the mediocrity of the herd. Sartre and the weight of authenticity. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, added yet another dimension. He argued that each of us is condemned to freedom. We cannot escape the responsibility of choosing, even if we pretend otherwise. Conformity, then, is a form of bad faith, a way of lying to ourselves by pretending we are victims of circumstance rather than authors of our lives. But when someone refuses to conform, when they embrace authenticity, they expose our self-deception. They force us to confront the fact that we too are free and that our excuses are nothing more than chains we willingly accept. Sartre's insight cuts deep. The fear of the nonconformist is really the fear of our own freedom. Huxley, Conditioning and the Machinery of Control. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, imagined a society where conformity was not enforced by whips or prisons, but by pleasure and conditioning. People were trained from birth to love their servitude, to crave their distractions, to avoid discomfort at all costs. Look around today. The endless scroll of entertainment, the dopamine drip of social media, the consumerist cycle of buy, use, discard, repeat. Conformity does not feel like oppression anymore, it feels like convenience. The prison walls are soft, cushioned, even addictive. And yet what happens when someone resists? They are not merely unusual, they are disruptive. They threaten the delicate machinery that keeps billions of people compliant. They reveal the illusion for what it is. No wonder society reacts with fear. The entire system depends on people never asking the dangerous question, what if everything we've accepted is a lie? The psychological trap. Here lies the hidden problem. Society fears the nonconformist not because they are dangerous in themselves, but because they reveal the fragility of the collective illusion. Conformity gives us safety, belonging, identity. Nonconformity threatens to take all of that away, and so, rather than confront the truth, we demonize the one who dares to live differently. But this fear is not without consequences. Suppressing individuality comes at a price. Repressing freedom breeds resentment, neurosis, and despair. When a society punishes authenticity, it condemns itself to stagnation, and so the tension deepens. The tribe needs conformity to survive, but humanity needs non-conformity to evolve. The stage is now set for the next revelation. If conformity protects us, what hidden dangers are unleashed when we obey too blindly? What unseen consequences shape our lives when we bury individuality beneath the mask of belonging? Picture yourself walking through a crowded city street. Everywhere you look, people seem different. Different clothes, different faces, different lives. And yet look closer. Beneath the surface, something eerie happens. The rhythm of their movements, the cadence of their speech, even the invisible boundaries of their dreams all fall within a narrow script. A choreography no one remembers learning, yet everyone performs. We call it normal. We call it civilized. But what if this normal is nothing more than conformity disguised as freedom? This is the hidden danger. Conformity doesn't just shape behavior, it reshapes desire. It doesn't merely control what we do, it teaches us what to want. And when enough people internalize the same values, the same fears, the same ambitions, they become willing participants in their own captivity. The subtle violence of the mask. When you conform, you wear a must. Maybe you wear it at work, where you nod and smile at rules you despise. Maybe you wear it among friends, laughing at jokes that don't amuse you. Maybe you wear it in your family, playing the role expected of you, rather than the person you really are. At first, the mask feels temporary, a survival tactic. But over time, something sinister happens. The mask begins to fuse with the face. You forget where performance ends and authenticity begins. You confuse adaptation with identity. Carl Jung warned of this in his concept of the persona, the social mask we present to the world. The persona is necessary. Without it, society would collapse into chaos. But when the persona becomes too rigid, when we identify more with the mask than with the self, we suffer. Anxiety, depression, and existential emptiness often grow from this fracture. Society praises the mask wearer and punishes the one who dares to remove it. But the longer we hide behind these facades, the more estranged we become from our own souls. Cognitive biases, the invisible chains. Psychology reveals how conformity takes root not just socially, but neurologically. Consider the Asch conformity experiments. Participants, faced with a group confidently giving the wrong answer to a simple visual question, often abandon their own correct perception to match the group. Why? Because the brain is wired to avoid social rejection at almost any cost. Belonging feels safer than truth. Or take the bystander effect. When many people witness a crisis, each assumes someone else will act. Silence multiplies. Conformity creates paralysis. Justice dies, not in the presence of evil, but in the absence of courage. Then there's the status quo bias, the tendency to prefer things to remain as they are. It's easier to keep silent than to question, easier to obey than to rebel, easier to stay in the prison we know than to step into the wilderness of the unknown. These biases are not rare glitches, they are universal, which means conformity is not a choice we make once, it is a gravity pulling on us at all times. Culture as the architect of desire. But conformity's reach extends beyond psychology. It seeps into culture itself. Consider how societies dictate success. One culture glorifies wealth, another honor, another obedience, another freedom. Yet in each case, individuals learn to desire what the culture rewards, even if it kills their spirit. Aldous Huxley's insight resurfaces here. The most effective form of control is not force, but conditioning. A person convinced that their cage is a palace will never try to escape. Consumerism is a perfect example. We are told happiness lies in possessions, in upgrades, in lifestyles. And so, we chase endlessly, never pausing to ask, whose dream am I living? The unseen consequence? A population too distracted to question, too conditioned to imagine alternatives, too exhausted to rebel. The silent death of creativity. Conformity kills more than authenticity. It strangles creativity. Innovation, after all, begins with disobedience, the refusal to accept that things must remain as they are. Every breakthrough in art, science, or philosophy was born from someone daring to defy consensus. And yet, look at our schools, our workplaces, our institutions. How often do they reward compliance over curiosity, obedience over imagination? Children learn quickly that coloring outside the lines earns punishment, not praise. Employees discover that questioning the system threatens careers, not just reputations. Over time, a subtle tragedy unfolds. The potential genius of millions withers unseen. Society loses not only its rebels but its innovators. The cost of conformity is measured not just in souls suppressed, but in futures never realized. The inner decay, but perhaps the most devastating consequence, is inward. The conformist may appear well-adjusted, respected, even successful, but inside, a quiet erosion begins. Arthur Schopenhauer once described life as oscillating between pain and boredom. Conformity offers an escape from pain, belonging shields you from rejection, obedience shields you from risk. But in exchange, it delivers you to boredom, a life without true passion, a self dulled by endless repetition, a spirit that whispers at night, "Is this all there is?" Some drown this emptiness in distractions, consumption, addictions, endless entertainment. Others project it outward, resenting those who dare to live differently. And thus, the cycle perpetuates. The repressed turn into the enforcers, punishing in others the very freedom they've denied themselves. When the illusion cracks, but illusions can't last forever. Sometimes a crisis, a betrayal, a loss, a sudden glimpse of mortality shatters the comfortable script. The mask slips and the truth rushes in. I have lived someone else's life. This realization can be devastating. It can spiral into nihilism, the sense that nothing has meaning. Or it can ignite rebellion, the desperate need to reclaim one's authentic self. And here lies the paradox. Society depends on conformity to keep order. Yet when conformity becomes too total, collapse is inevitable. Stagnation breeds decay. Creativity suffocates. Discontent festers beneath the surface until it erupts in revolution, often violent, always disruptive. The consequences of conformity are not only personal but civilizational. A society that fears non-conformity creates the very conditions that ensure its downfall. The looming question. Now we arrive at the brink of an unsettling realization. Conformity protects us, but it also poisons us. It shields us from danger, but slowly robs us of life. It sustains civilization, but silently erodes the very creativity and authenticity that makes civilization worth sustaining. So the question shifts. If conformity enslaves us, how do we break free? How do we reclaim authenticity without being crushed by the weight of the group? How can one individual rebel against the gravity of the herd and survive? The answer lies not in rejection for its own sake, but in a radical reimagining of freedom, courage, and meaning. To understand this rebellion, we must turn to those rare individuals who chose exile over compromise, truth over acceptance, freedom over comfort. And it is here, in their defiance, that the map out of the cage begins to appear. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff. Behind you lies the well-worn path of conformity, safe, predictable, approved by everyone you know. Before you yawns an abyss, the unknown, the dangerous, the pathless. You feel the eyes of the tribe on your back, their whispers clawing at your resolve. Don't go. Don't be foolish. Don't betray us. But deep down, another voice rises. It is quieter, older, truer. It says, "Leap." This is the rebellion, and it does not begin with a revolution in the streets, but with a revolution in the soul. The courage to disobey. Breaking free begins with disobedience, the courage to say no, not out of childish defiance, but as an act of radical authenticity. Think of Socrates standing before the Athenian court, accused of corrupting the youth. The easy choice was to conform, to abandon his questions, to save his life. But Socrates chose truth over survival. He drank the hemlock, and with his death, lit a fire that has burned through centuries. Or think of Galileo, forced by the Inquisition to recant his discoveries about the cosmos. Under pressure, he bent, but his whispered words, "and yet it moves," carried the defiance of a mind unwilling to kneel forever. Every act of rebellion begins with this moment, the refusal to betray one's inner knowing. Shadow work, meeting the exiled self. But how do you find this inner knowing when years of conformity have buried it? Carl Jung's answer was shadow work, the process of confronting the parts of ourselves we've denied or repressed. The rebel's first battle is not against society, but against the self. You must ask, what have I exiled from my own heart to belong? What truths have I silenced to be accepted? Perhaps you buried your creativity because it wasn't practical. Perhaps you silenced your anger because it was unacceptable. Perhaps you denied your dreams because they didn't fit the mold. To break free, you must reclaim these exiled parts. You must dare to integrate them, even when they make you strange, misunderstood, or feared. Because freedom is not found in denying who you are. It is found in becoming whole. Nietzsche's call to become who you are. Nietzsche offered a radical vision of rebellion, the call to become who you truly are. He urged us to reject herd morality, to embrace the chaos within, to create values of our own rather than inherit them blindly. His vision of the Übermensch was not a tyrant, but a creator, a human who dares to sculpt their life as an artist sculpts stone. This path is terrifying because it offers no guarantees, no ready-made rules, but it is also exhilarating because it offers what conformity never can, the dignity of authorship. To break free, then, is to become an artist of your existence, to live not as a copy, but as an original. Practical rebellion, small acts of freedom. Rebellion does not always mean grand gestures. Sometimes it begins in the smallest acts, saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. Speaking truth in a room that thrives on silence. Creating something that no one asked for, but your soul demanded. Choosing a path that earns ridicule instead of applause. These moments accumulate. They build the muscle of authenticity. Each act of defiance, however small, strengthens the rebel within. And slowly, the mask begins to crack. The cost of authenticity. But make no mistake, rebellion has a cost. You may lose friends who only loved the version of you that conformed. You may lose opportunities that reward compliance over integrity. You may face ridicule, suspicion, even hostility. This is why society fears the rebel, because their courage exposes the cowardice of others. Your authenticity will provoke envy in those still imprisoned, and some will try to pull you back into the cage not because they hate you, but because your freedom terrifies them. The question is, Are you willing to pay the price? Viktor Frankl, who endured the horrors of a concentration camp, once wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Rebellion begins with this inner freedom, the refusal to let external forces dictate who you are. The paradox of rebellion. Here lies a paradox. The more you rebel authentically, the less you need to fight society directly. Because rebellion is not about destruction, it is about creation. It is about living so fully, so unapologetically, that your very existence becomes a challenge to conformity. Think of artists, thinkers, mystics, who changed the world not by overthrowing it violently, but by offering visions so powerful they could not be ignored. Dostoevsky wrote novels that revealed the abyss of the human soul. Kierkegaard lived as an outsider, exposing the despair at the heart of modern faith. Gabor Mate speaks today of trauma and addiction with a candor that unsettles the comfortable narratives of medicine and culture alike. Their rebellion was not loud, but it was profound, and it continues to echo. Toward a new way of living, breaking free is not about rejecting society entirely. It is about refusing to be enslaved by it. It is about moving through the world as yourself, unmasked, unashamed, unafraid. You will still need community, you will still need structure, but you will no longer confuse survival with surrender. You will no longer accept belonging at the cost of your soul. And when enough individuals begin to live this way, something extraordinary happens. Society itself begins to change. The cage weakens. The herd grows braver. The illusion loses its grip. This is the true rebellion. Not anarchy, but authenticity. Not destruction, but creation. Not the abandonment of responsibility, but the courageous acceptance of it. The threshold. And so the cliff remains before you, daring you to leap. Behind you lies the comfort of conformity, the approval of the tribe, the safety of the known. Before you lies exile, uncertainty, struggle, but also freedom. The question is no longer why society fears nonconformity. The question is, will you remain a prisoner of the herd, or will you dare to step beyond it? Yet even here, on the brink of rebellion, something deeper waits. A final truth, darker and brighter than all we've seen. Because beyond the act of breaking free lies a revelation that changes everything, not just how you see society, but how you see existence itself. And that truth is where our journey must end. The final, most powerful realization. Imagine it. You've stepped beyond the herd. You've taken off the mask. You've dared to live as yourself, unashamed. For a while, the freedom feels intoxicating. You breathe deeper. The air tastes sharper. Life itself begins to hum with intensity. But then comes the silence. The tribe is no longer around you, no longer there to affirm your choices, no longer there to soften the edges of solitude. You stand in the wilderness of existence, exposed. The structures you once leaned on, the expectations, the rules, the ready-made meaning, they dissolve. What is left is both terrifying and liberating. Nothing but yourself. And this is the final truth. Society fears the nonconformist not only because they threaten order, but because they embody the deepest reality of human existence. That meaning, identity, and truth are not given. They must be created. The abyss of freedom, Jean-Paul Sartre called it the anguish of freedom. We are condemned to be free. No God, no authority, no ideology can ultimately relieve us of the burden of choosing. We can pretend to conform, we can hide behind the herd, but the truth remains, the responsibility for our lives rests with us and us alone. This is why conformity feels safe. It shields us from the abyss. It whispers, don't worry, we've chosen for you, we've built the script, just follow it. And most people do. But when you refuse conformity, you face the abyss directly. You stand at the edge of nothingness, and the silence asks, what will you create? Who will you become? The nonconformist terrifies society because they remind us all of this abyss. They force us to see that the ground beneath our feet is not solid. It is a construction, fragile and temporary. And once you've seen it, you can never unsee it. The death of illusion. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote that most human suffering comes not from life itself, but from the illusions we build to avoid it. We cling to promises of everlasting happiness, to fantasies of control, to comforting lies about justice or destiny. Conformity is one of these illusions. It tells us that if we just obey, if we just belong, everything will be fine. But the rebel who refuses to conform destroys this illusion. They remind us that safety is temporary, that meaning is not guaranteed, that truth is always in question. It feels like destruction, but it is also a liberation. Because when illusion dies, authenticity is born. The creative flame. Here lies the paradox. When you finally confront the void, when you accept that there is no script, you gain the one thing conformity can never offer: true creativity. Nietzsche's call to become who you are is not a command to discover some fixed essence, but an invitation to create yourself. You are not a puzzle to be solved. You are clay to be shaped, a canvas to be painted, a symphony to be composed. This is the ultimate truth. The non-conformist is not merely rebelling against society. They are rebelling against nothingness itself. They stand in the void and say, "I will create." And in that act of creation, they ignite a light that others, still imprisoned, cannot ignore. The ripple effect. Think of history's great nonconformists. Socrates questioned, Galileo observed, Nietzsche provoked, Jung explored, Sartre rebelled, Huxley warned, Gabor Mate heals. Each, in their own way, stood outside the herd and pointed to the abyss. Each offered not comfort, but courage. And though society resisted them, sometimes mocking, sometimes punishing, sometimes silencing, their flame spread. Their ideas outlived the cages of their time. Their courage became the seed of transformation. This is the ripple effect of authenticity. One individual's refusal to conform gives others permission to do the same. The rebel becomes not just an exile, but a beacon. The burden and the gift. But let us not romanticize too easily. To live authentically is not a guarantee of happiness. It often means carrying heavier burdens, loneliness, misunderstanding, even persecution. Dostoevsky captured this in his novels. The rebel suffers not because they are wrong, but because they see too much, feel too deeply, live too freely. And yet, within this suffering lies a gift. To suffer for truth is different than to suffer for illusion. One corrodes, the other refines. Viktor Frankl saw this in the camps. Even when stripped of everything, a person could choose their attitude, could find meaning in suffering itself. The rebel's burden becomes their power, the ability to transform pain into wisdom, exile into freedom, despair into creation. The mirror of your own life. And now, the question turns back to you. How much of your life has been lived for the approval of others? How many of your choices were chosen for you by culture, by family, by fear? How many masks have you worn so long that you no longer remember the face beneath? If society fears those who refuse to conform, then ask yourself, am I one of the feared or one of the fearful? This is not a comfortable question, but it may be the most important one you ever ask, because your life, no matter how long or short, is a singular event in the history of the universe. No one else will ever live it for you, and if you spend it conforming, whose life will you have lived? The final realization, here is the final truth. Nonconformity is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Without it, civilization stagnates. Without it, the human spirit suffocates. Without it, you will die having never truly lived. Society will always fear the nonconformist. But perhaps it is time to see that fear for what it is, not a warning to stay in line, but an invitation to step beyond it. The greatest danger is not that you will be rejected by the tribe. The greatest danger is that you will reject yourself, that you will bury your soul so deeply beneath masks and scripts that you forget it was ever there. The rebel's path is hard, but it is the only path that leads to life. To stand at the edge of the abyss, to confront the silence, to create meaning where none was given. That is the highest act of courage a human being can achieve. And so the question remains, hanging in the air like a challenge. Will you live as a shadow of what society demands, or will you dare to live as the flame of who you truly are? The answer, of course, can never be given by the herd. It can only be chosen by you.